I think we can get started now. We'll probably have a few more people trickle in, but that's fine. Um, so thanks everyone for making time out of your busy days to hear some best practices for internal email broadcasts. If we want to jump to the next slide, we can kind of get into a few things. As you can see, I'm Mike McNeely. Michael DeRoche will also be presenting. A few housekeeping notes. This is being recorded, so we'll send a copy to everyone who attends today. We'll also send copies of our benchmark report and the internal email best practices guide. Everyone is muted, but we certainly welcome your questions and comments. And for that, please use the Q&A feature within Zoom to ask questions, and I'll be keeping an eye on those as they come in, and we'll try and address them right as they come up. All right, so what we're going to be talking about today, these best practices, are gleaned from a deep analysis of, as you can see here, over 4 billion internal emails to nearly 15 million employees globally. And so that's email traffic flowing across polite mail servers, across hundreds of customers. And we're able to do a lot of slicing and dicing of that data to come up with insights that we can certainly that we're going to be sharing today to help you determine some best practices around when to send and your content and your subject lines and things like that to get you hopefully even better engagement with your audiences. So as I mentioned, we will be sending you a copy of this report as well as the deck from this presentation. So over to you, Michael.
All right. Yeah, and obviously the best practices directly related to overcoming that employee feeling of email overload. So how to strike the balance between getting the communications you need out there and having employees actually having the bandwidth to pay attention and read them. And one of the things everyone saw was in the pandemic period a considerable spike in email volume, kind of on a per employee basis. And that has gradually kind of come back down to normal. One of the things we notice, anytime there's an increase in email volume, you'll see a decrease in attention. Attention is a limited resource that everybody has. And as you get more volume, that kind of declines. But we expect that to kind of come back up as email volumes have decreased. Readership has come back, to the kind of the pre-pandemic levels, and click rates are still slightly lower, but right in the ballpark. So kind of the return to normal is kind of what we're seeing in email in general. And with polite mail, we're still seeing on average what we do is kind of monitor where clients start and where they are after a couple of years. And these are average improvement rates in attention, readership, and engagement. And you can obviously, there's a big difference between average, which is kind of middle of the road, and the top 20% improved quite a bit.
So the top 20% is what we're seeing here is the average for that top 20% group, right? And then the average is just the average of all users.
That's right. Yep. So we take a quintile, bottom 20, and kind of like grading. And so this is the average for that top 20. So some people do even better.
Yeah. Okay. And then one thing I'll point out for anyone attending who's not a polite mail user, they may not be familiar. What we call a read or readership is anyone who's opened the message and spent enough time to read at least 30% of the content based on their time on message relative to the length of the email or a few things to assess reading time. So enough time to read 30% of it, we consider that a read.
Yeah, that's actually a good point on attention. That's another kind of uncommon term. Most tools focus on open rates. Polite Mail has a read timing, anything less than 3 seconds. Generally, we call it ignore. So they did open it, but they didn't give it any attention. So we subtract those ignores from the opens to get the attention rate.
All right.
All right. And generally, communicators are doing a lot of work. The chart here is messages, the lighter gray, and minutes, the darker gray. And again, you can kind of see the immediate post-pandemic period was a lot going on than currently. It's kind of come down 30%, 35%. In terms of how much content is being sent per employee. But communicators are still producing, 61 messages on average per month. 28, almost 30,000 words of content being produced, and about 30 minutes of reading time per employee. Obviously, that's averaged out across entire audiences. So some audiences are getting a lot more content, some are getting less. So that's just an average, but it does show the amount of production that the communication teams are doing.
All right. So for this, if I'm looking at this correctly, Michael, is it telling me that as a communicator, I may be better off sending a message without a banner image and using a headline, a text headline instead?
Yeah, what we're looking at is content ratio. So we kind of look at what the message composition looks like, right? Is it all text, mostly text, or mostly images? And then you can see in the gray that's showing you how much volume is being sent based on those compositions, and mostly images is being sent the most. So there's like 4 times as much image or mostly image messages being sent. But the attention rate is higher on those text or mostly text images. Most often, like when you think about attention, it's who's it from, what's it about, and what's in the preview window. So you're right. I think what we're seeing here is headlines matter much more than banners when it comes to capturing someone's attention. So
Right.
that's but the interesting thing is, mostly text emails, a lot of communicators take a marketing approach to a lot of content. It has to look nice and have images and all that. But what we see is that in a lot of cases, text or mostly text messages work just as well when it comes to, at least particularly when it comes to getting people's attention.
Interesting.
All right. And a lifespan of an email. So there previously, when we did this analysis, there was a much bigger difference between emails sent in the morning period, before noon, and emails sent afternoons. So we break those up, but we're seeing that kind of converge a little bit. I think in the work from home environment, there's the in-office schedules aren't the same as the at-home schedules. And so what we're seeing is kind of a convergence here, but you still have the morning after effect, the day, you send the email that day. You'll notice in the first chart at the bottom, you see a dip and then a big bump, and that's about 12 to 16 hours after. So that's pretty much the next morning. You see a similar pattern in the afternoon, but the afternoon emails will get to more people over the course of that 24-hour span than the morning emails, because some people, what happens after that 24 hours is still part of the workday, whereas in the afternoon emails, not so much. But essentially you see the immediate response. So people are on email most often. So within an hour or to 2 hours, you're going to hit the majority of your audience, or at least half of it, and then that'll gradually tail off. And you get a couple bumps, a small bump after 2 days, a smaller bump after 3 days, and at that point, you don't see much activity with an email after 3 days.
So seems like if people want to send a follow-up email to make sure, people have opened it or taken action or whatever, you could pretty safely send it just 3 days later, or maybe even late on the second day, because at that point, you've gotten just about everyone that was going to open it.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. At that point, the initial send is buried in the inbox and ideal time to follow up.
Got it.
All right. And so these are just average, so we take the morning and the afternoon and put them together. So within 2 hours, you're going to hit half your audience. Within 36 hours, you'll have the majority. Would have at least received it, seen it, not necessarily read it, of course, but all right. This is the question that we always ask is, are employees even reading the email you send? And that's why we don't focus on open rates so much, but focus more on attention and readership as key metrics in terms of, our employees getting the message.
Yeah. So, and it's funny, this headline is one of these: communications is critical. Seems like it should be communications are critical, but we're talking about, communications as a function, like corporate communications or internal communications. Anyway, so you all as communicators are, central to these objectives that are critical to an organization's success, right? You know that. And this is kind of how it breaks down, right? First, you have to grab their attention. As Michael said, we're all in a battle for attention these days, not just at work, right? You know, you're sending communications, their managers are, their teammates are, their, customers, whoever. Plus, there's, chat, there's the internet, there's so many different channels. And then you've got external things. People are looking at their news feeds or social media or whatever. So it's a huge battle for attention or mind share. So first you have to get their attention, which is not easy, as you know. Great subject lines are key to that. Then getting them to actually read it. And in that, change their thinking or make them aware of something. And then finally, in most cases, you're trying to get them to take some action. So um, we do measure attention rate, as Michael said earlier. If someone opens a message, but they are only have it open for less than 3 seconds, that wouldn't register for us on our attention metric. So it's not just getting them to open it, it's getting them to kind of sink their teeth into it. And that's really important, right? Because there's a lot of opens that don't meet that fairly low bar. So we will we'll dig into that a little bit further as we go along here.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, employees, you might even hear this, they complain, and sometimes rightfully so, about receiving too many emails. We have some information from Gartner that, based on a survey, 49% of employees are dealing with what they call high information burden, and that's defined as, that's taking into account all channels, text, apps, chats, etc. So basically half are dealing with high information burden, and those that are report a low intent to stay with their current companies. And 57% of employees say they often receive multiple communications about the same or similar topics at the same time, which is obviously a problem. And the average employee wastes about 3 hours and 20 minutes per week dealing with this information burden. So, how can you effectively cut through all of this without, and communicate critical information without overwhelming your employees? So that's why we're here today, is to look at some of these best practices.
Yeah, and sometimes we hear solutions being, well, we're gonna stop using email, and essentially all that does is push all that communication into a different channel. It's still there. still can be overwhelming. Some solutions tend to be like, okay, well, we won't send as much email. We'll just send consolidated emails. Oftentimes that results in, news being stale or them already having heard about a lot of it, and it's in a longer email, so it's easier to ignore. So you won't see those solutions in our best practices. We'll have some others here that we're going to recommend based on the data.
Yeah, and along those lines, research shows that on average, people get over 100 emails per day. Some people get a lot more than that. Um, so we naturally, that on top of everything else we're getting bombarded with, um, we naturally have to filter things and prioritize. So generally, the way people do that is they're looking at, okay, what am I getting here? Who's it from? Who is this even relevant to me? And then the other question to consider is, when am I receiving this? So when is this being sent? And those all matter. So we're going to dig into kind of how to capitalize on these priorities and how people are filtering information.
All right. So based on kind of our analysis of the that kind of best practices data set. Here we're kind of analyzing a couple of things like who the email is coming from and what people pay attention to. And then we're also looking at frequency or cadence. So we're kind of matching up uh, who messages are sent to and from, kind of the same uh, from to the same audience from the same person, and we're looking at what the cadence on those is and how that affects readership over time. So those are kind of our two charts here. But essentially, what happens is people will pay more attention, about 7% more attention to a person that they know that doesn't happen to be the sender. And usually those would be leaders, right? So that makes sense. They're going to pay attention to those. But the key thing there is like they're more apt to pay attention to messages from a person than a shared mailbox, provided they know who that person is. And then for each 2%, you lose 2% of readership for each increase in frequency, and you kind of see the frequency ranges. Once a month, once a month, greater than once a month, on down the line. The interesting thing I always see here is, obviously there's a decline in readership when your volume goes up to once a day, but it actually goes up a little bit even when there's more than once a day. So employees can certainly handle high frequency of email, and we'll have some more data later on that shows you that is even more true when the messages are short. But the key to understanding the cadence is you can actually work yourself back on that chart, so into the higher ranges of readership, just by changing the from address, right? So if you're putting a whole bunch of messages from one shared communications app mailbox, if you can get more addresses to send from and kind of tune that address to the content, then you're going to have better readership just because you're reducing the frequency. And again, it's that game of high frequency, lower attention, lower frequency, novelty, higher attention. So that, and email addresses, fortunately, shared mailboxes are free. Email aliases are free, free to the extent you've got to get your IT team to cooperate and give you them. But generally, that's a fairly low bar ask. So what we're recommending here is just, send from more different email addresses and you'll get better results.
Yep. So yeah, so it's like combination. So from address A shouldn't always go to, audience A. You have to keep mixing up those combinations. Yeah, so multiple from addresses, huh? That's the key takeaway here. Should mix it up. Sounds like it.
Yep.
All right.
All right. And then smaller audiences perform better than larger audiences, and you can see all these charts have a steady decline as the audiences get bigger and bigger. So in that under 5,000 range, they're kind of on the high end of the scale, and as they decline, as they increase in audience size, the rates tend to decline. Most people will ask, well, what's the deal with the spike at 30 to 50K? And you'll see in that range in our benchmarks, we do see just generally higher rates overall, and mostly that's because we have a set of customers in that range that have uh, tuned their distribution groups. So Politemail has some tools to help you keep those lists up to date. And we have a large number in that segment size that have done that. So um, instantly, by improving your accuracy of your distribution groups, you're going to have a higher open rate, and everything improves from there, right? It's just a denominator problem, a math issue. If you have a high number of former employees on your distribution groups that will never open the email or read the email, it's just going to lower your rates overall. So if you clean that up, that's a very easy way to improve your rates.
All right. And Michael, one question for you, and then I realized I've been a little negligent here. There's a few questions that have come in and I missed them, so we can maybe pause for a minute and answer questions. But my question on the slide we're on right now, so if under 5,000 recipients is optimal, what if you're an organization with 40, 80, 100,000 employees, and sometimes you do have to send all employee communications? Is there any sort of recommended strategy about how to, make those more targeted, or
Yeah, I
change
mean,
the...
sometimes you can't avoid it, right? There's one message from the CEO that has to go to everybody the same way, and it's just the way that it is, right? And you're just, you can just expect to have slightly lower readership the bigger your audience gets. But certainly in any communication where you can break down the audience, maybe by region or by business unit, anywhere where you can kind of reduce the audience and kind of tune the content a little bit to that audience, you're going to get better results.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's backtrack a little bit. Again, my apologies here. So the first question, going back, is that it says, is that timeline normalized for recipients' local time? And I'm not exactly sure which slide this came in on, but it's generally based on the sender's time.
That's right.
So yeah, so that it's based on the sender's time. So no, it's not normalized. And then there's another one saying, can you show emails with and without images? An example of a text email. We could probably send you something. So, text just means that it was simply words, right? They just typed an email, no images, no banners.
Yeah, I get a LinkedIn newsletter that uses that strategy. So they use different font sizes, right? So it still looks interesting. It's not just, you know, an email you might send to your colleague, hey, I just finished that report, I got two more things and I'll send you the copy, whatever, just quick. That's a text email, right? But you can do text emails that, you have a big headline, maybe it's a news, like again, the LinkedIn example I'm thinking of is a newsletter. So they've got some attention grabbing headline, big font at the top, and then each story has like a 20-point font headline with a 2-sentence 14-point kind of text underneath, and white space, then the next one, white space, then the next one. So that would be an example of just a text email. Like there's no images. It still looks interesting because you're using fonts and colors. It's not just a typical email, note from colleague to colleague, but those we've seen as well. Those can work just as well. Obviously and you'll see in some of the recommendations below, you always benefit from making the email easier to read, right? Like no one wants to see a big block of text, and it just feels imposing oftentimes if your entire preview pane is a massive paragraph. But break it up with white space. You don't have to use necessarily super huge fonts, but that's really just a text email or mostly text email is maybe you have a logo, or maybe you have just one icon or picture and everything else is text. So that's the difference. Whereas a highly visual email with a big image and a big image for each story, That's kind of the difference, if you can kind of imagine those.
All right. So some more questions. This one, what is considered a good or great open rate? And I know that's got to all be in the benchmark report, which we'll be providing, right?
Yeah, I mean, our internal target is 80%. Like you should with an internal with a good clean list, right? And our assumption always was that, most large companies would have accurate distribution lists. Actually, kind of the opposite is true because, I mean, just because someone leaves the company, their email account is disabled, but generally it's not removed from groups because IT's keeping the mailbox in case they need to go through it at any point, what have you. So oftentimes those addresses are still on the distribution groups. But assuming that it's relatively clean, our goal is like you should for internal communications in particular, you should be able to get an 80% or greater uh, open rate, whereas most email marketing tools, external email, they're looking at like a 25% or 20 some odd percent on average, with 40% being considered good from a marketing standpoint.
And someone chatted me that for the top quintile, top 20%, the average open rate was 83%. So really strong. All right, we still have some more questions here. We've got some great questions. Do you see most internal communications clients syncing with the payroll or HRIS system to ensure distribution data accuracy? I would
Um,
not say most,
right.
but more and more. And it's a really nice thing to do, not only for the list accuracy, but to be able to target, to easily create segmented lists, because there's so many attributes in those systems, where it's like maybe, line of business or manager or location, things like that, region, role. And that way you as communicators can leverage those attributes to make nice, segmented, targeted audiences like we're talking about here, to be able to have smaller lists. And with Polite Mail, actually, when we integrate with, like Workday or something, PeopleSoft, um, those lists are typically updated every night from Workday, for example, so that they're also always up to date.
Yeah. So inactive employees are being removed and new employees are getting on the list right away. So those are typically improvements that um, can happen when you're syncing that data, which doesn't necessarily make it back into Active Directory or the Outlook address book as fast.
Okay. Another one. Do you see a higher rate of opens when using personalized subject lines, for example, with a first name in the subject line? Have you
We
looked into
haven't,
that?
yeah, we haven't done that analysis on that particular use case, but in general, any personalization or relevancy, um, that uh, is noticeable will increase attention. But again, if you overuse it, then it's going to go the opposite way. So it's kind of that delicate balance. If you're always doing it, and then they're kind of like, okay. But
Yeah.
if once in a while, you put it in there, you should see. And it might not be significant. It might only be a couple percentage points, but when you're talking about audiences that might be several thousands of people, those couple of percentages add up.
Okay, last one we have for right now, just sort of a question slash comment. It says, it amazes me when internal areas ask for more visual messages. As far as I know, I read with my eyes, which by definition makes it visual. Am I wrong? So yeah, that I can see why that would be a little bit perplexing and frustrating. I think when people say that, they just want more images, right? More sort of, graphics and things like that. That's how I take that. It's their attempt to have it be more sort of splashy or flashy. I don't know. Would you agree, Michael?
Yeah, I think so. And then, and it's really just, uh, again, we see a lot of, say, I don't want to throw HR under the bus necessarily, but more often from when emails coming from HR versus communications team, there's a lot less design considerations. And so you get a lot of that, it looks like it should be a PDF or a Word document, right? The email looks more like that. And I think that's where, it can be a little bit difficult or just more challenging to read as a web page or an email page with using those print layouts. Whereas if you adopt it and vary your font size, add some more white spacing, put some images and icons in there, it's just easier to scroll through and consume on a digital environment versus a piece of paper.
All right. Thank you for the great questions. Keep them coming. We're caught up for now, so we can drive on.
All right. Yeah, and this is always a common question, like what's the best day of week to send an email? Um, we used to get best time of day, but that data is just there's not really a best time of day. So we're focusing here on just looking at the days of the week. And the interesting thing, you see here, the gray bars represent your total volume. The lines are representing your rates, your attention, readership, and click rates. Um, and so, what you'll notice is for whatever reason, Thursday is the big day for sending internal comms. Um, Monday is the lowest volume day. And again, not by a ton. I mean, you're looking at close to 1 billion on Thursdays, down, to 0.8 billion. So, a billion here or there difference overall, right? Lots of different companies sending here, but the you'll notice, Mondays has the higher rates in all cases, and then it declines over the course of the week, with Friday being the worst. And so, Mondays will outperform those sent later in the week, or even those sent on Thursdays by 4 or 5% on average. Um, and again, that part of that is obviously, there's less corporate comms going out on Monday, so people have a little bit more attention bandwidth and reading bandwidth, and but just as the week goes on, people get busier, and but the corporate comms also increase over the course of the week as well. So all of that contributes to declining attention, readership, and click rates.
All right.
All right, and subject lines, again, this is another key, as Mike mentioned, to what people pay attention to. Nowadays, for most modern email clients, whether it's in Outlook or on your mobile device, subject lines are getting cut off at somewhere between 40 and 50 characters. So that, fits with the front part of this chart, right? So as you get to that 7 or 8 words, that's where they're getting cut off. And so if you can keep your subject lines below that, you're going to have just higher attention. And the right side of the page here, just what we did is we took the top 20% attention email subjects and just put those into a word cloud. And you can kind of see the pattern here. So times and dates will get people to pay attention, and words like, update, action, required, new, now, those bigger words in there tend to be the more attention grabbing words in the subject line.
All right. So when I'm looking in my inbox, in the panel next to the preview pane, or even on my mobile device, a long subject line is just going to get cut off, right? I'm not going to be able to see the whole thing.
Right.
So it becomes sort of a waste. Okay. All right.
All right. And so here's our recommendation, to use headline text, not banners at the top of your messages. A lot of internal communications, we see still use the banner. It's kind of like a holdover from marketing. Oftentimes it's just branding. Sometimes it's, a big news, splash banner to announce the newsletter. But again, it's not this isn't external marketing. You don't really need to make your brand presence known because, just based on the from address, employees are going to know that it's coming from inside. So you don't need a massive logo or banner necessarily. And we know from attention that the text headlines are going to grab people's attention more than any banner. And you've got limited real estate in that preview pane. So using banner space, using a third or half of that high value premium real estate can go to waste. You can increase um, attention by 10% by using text headlines versus images. And so that's what we did here in this analysis. Slightly different than the other one is we only analyzed messages that were the content length would fit into that standard, the default Outlook preview pane. And here you see like a big spike in intention for that mostly text emails, and then it declines with the mostly images, but people are still sending mostly image emails, mostly images in the preview window. So we're recommending headlines and text and buttons. If you can get those in the preview window, you're going to get much better results. But it flips a little bit when it comes to readership for the entire message. And this might relate to the question about, they want more visual emails, right? In terms of readership, the green line, that increases for those longer messages. So messages, usually about 30 seconds of content will fit into a preview window. So messages longer than that is what we're talking about here. And, the more images that you have, the higher the readership, just because it, generally makes the message more scrollable. You might have text image, you might not, you might have captions under the image, but it just makes it a little bit easier to consume. People will spend more time with it because that's how we are measuring readership, by how long they actually have that message open.
All right, we just had a couple more questions come in. The first one says, is there a shortcut to include a preview line? And I'm sure I completely.
Yeah, so the preview, so there is Playmail does let you add preview text. And sometimes you'll notice, so you always get the subject line, but then they give you the mobile devices. And now I think the Outlook preview panel there will not the pane, but the messages panel will show you the first line of text or preview text, what's called preview text, which you can set. Playmail allows you to set that. Oftentimes, if you use a banner, what it's going to show you is the name of the image, which most people don't want. So our tool has the ability to override that and put in the text that you want, or to ignore the banner and actually have it read the first line of actual text. But I think that's what this is in relation to, is using that preview text feature of an email.
All right, a few more have just come in. Any strategies or guidelines on when to use email versus intranet as the primary communication tool?
Yeah, so you could just think about it in terms of long form, short form. And, what we've seen for some customers that have, done some experimentation, hey, we want to stop sending so much email, we're going to post it to the intranet. Oftentimes what they find is, one case, it was a massive difference, right? They were used to reaching 80,000 people on a regular basis with email. When they went to only intranet, it was like 600. So it was crazy differential. But what they did in that case is they posted the full content to the intranet, and they just did a real brief summary with links as the email. And the email proved to be the driver to the actual intranet page. So that's one way to slice it, is to take all long form, anything more than 500 words, 2 minutes, have that go to the intranet. And then, if you want to drive traffic to that page, make sure people see it, do a short form email that has the highlights and then links to get them to that page.
Right. Um, Next one, who was included in the benchmark study? How many companies and what type?
So all polite mail cloud service customers were included, which was roughly, say, somewhere between 300 and 400. Um, and we do have on-premise customers. We don't have access to any of that data, so that wasn't included. It's basically aggregated data that we're looking at. So um, there's no company specific stuff, but that's the basis of this data.
Got it. Okay. Is Polite Mail Builder recommended for a weekly newsletter? I would say yes, absolutely. Build a nice template because probably it follows a similar format each week. So you build the template once and then you've got it ready to just update each week with your new content, possibly images, etc. That's it's used for that a lot among our customer base. And then any advice on an appropriate cadence for all colleague emails? Is monthly too much?
So we do have a slide coming up that will speak directly to that point. So we'll keep that on the back of our minds here, and then make sure that it's addressed when we get to those slides.
All right. And last one that I see right now is, do you see any industries where internal communication engagement is a particular struggle? And I will say, just anecdotally, so this is not based on data, maybe Michael has some data, but um, any industry where you have a lot of non-desk workers, so manufacturing, retail, construction, things like that, where a lot of your workers are just pretty much never at a desk. Um, those tend to struggle. I think that's something we hear about quite a bit. Michael, I don't know what you'd add to that.
Yeah, and I would say kind of our education category tends to be for some reason lower, whereas like tech and finance tend to be have the highest performance. And again, that kind of follows what Mike is suggesting here, because those are industries that most everyone's behind a desk working on a computer most of the time. So email is going to be really effective in those environments. Healthcare, we still have, there's still good metrics there, but they're lower. And again, there's large groups in healthcare that they're not, nurses, doctors, technicians are just not behind a computer. They might check it a few times a day. So the performance of email in those environments is just inherently going to be lower. Education, for some reason, although I think sometimes some of our education clients also include their student population in there, which they tend to be pretty big, and B, most students of that age are not tuned into email as much as, say, people that have been in the workforce for 5 or 10 years, and that's part of their job. So I think that may be one reason why the education metrics are a little bit lower than other industries, but I think that seems to be the
Yeah, the students dilute the open rate
yeah.
for sure, and or overall engagement. All right, we have a few more best practices.
All right. So here is the kind of the short content, and we've seen this continue to decline uh, over the years. So it used to be 500 words. Now we're closer to 250 words. So about a minute is optimal, right? That's your highest readership, and we've kind of sliced and diced this a couple of different ways to look at what's happening. Um, with email. Like, so in the first chart, we're looking at skim rate and read rate. So a skim is, over 3 seconds, but under that 30% read threshold. We're also looking at the center chart, percent read. So out of the total content that was sent, how much of it actually gets read. So of course, not everybody reads everything, but you'll notice the gray bar starts to increase as a multiple of the green bar. So the longer the messages get, the less of it people are reading. And the last chart is just a kind of a trend analysis, and you can just see that steady decline as you add more and more words. For every 250 words you add, you're going to lose about 10% of your audience. So it just as they reach their kind of attention or engagement thresholds, they drop off. So the optimum message, optimum size of an email is 250 words. It doesn't mean that long form emails don't work. It's just they don't work obviously as well, and people will read less of them. So it doesn't mean never do them, but it does mean don't expect the performance to be anywhere near a short message.
Pretty amazing to see that, people, there's a decent amount of messages that are 5 to 10 minutes long. That's a lot of content. Um, I would think in a situation like that, you might want to use something like a bookmarking feature where people can skip to certain sections. Um, or you'd at least
Yeah,
have to
certainly
break it
that.
up with bullets and headlines and things, right?
Yeah, and a lot of those, they're consolidated emails that cover a wide variety of subjects, and in those cases, you're really better off sending separate emails. Again, people can handle, and we'll have some other charts to show this later. They can actually handle higher volumes of email so long as the content is short. Um, our kind of analysis of the data is that the email overload comes primarily from too many messages with too much to read, right? So if you have a lot of short messages, it's much easier to get through those than one really long message.
Mm, yep, that I can see that for sure. All right, links.
All right, and in terms of getting someone to click something, messages with just one or two links are going to give you the highest performance. And it's kind of, if you look at this data, it's kind of counterintuitive. You would think you give people more options and they would click more things, but it's actually the opposite, right? So the chart on the right-hand side is showing you number of links kind of offered in the email, the 5, 10, 15, 20 at the bottom, and then the bar is how many total clicks you actually get from those messages. So the fewer the links, the higher, the more clicks and the higher the click rate you get. And then we also analyze this by message length. And you can see here again, the 1 minute message that 250 words or less performs the highest, still pretty good at that 500 words. And then it, rapidly declines from there. So the longer the content, the less likely you are to get someone to click on it.
All right.
Right. In reading ease, many people are familiar with the Fleisch-Kincaid score. Essentially, it's just a grading scoring system for how easy the content is to read. You'll notice on the charts, there's the bars are volumes, like how much gets sent in each category. There's very little messages sent that are very easy or easy, and those obviously have much, higher rates of in every category, right? Readership, clicks, percent read is higher. Now, part of that is just the fact that not many get sent, so it's a smaller sample size. But the other part is just when content is easy and the kind of some of the, and it's not just based on the words. There is a part of the calculation that's based on complexity of the words and whether there's a lot of acronyms used, and in some industries, finance or even technology in particular, you just can't get away from some of that stuff. But in most cases, you can kind of game, or you can get a lower grade level just by using shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs, and more white space, right? So just making it easier for your eye to move through will give you a lower, which is better, reading E score. So your lower grade level, higher reading E score. So that's one technique if you can't kind of change the language, but anywhere where you can use simpler words and shorter sentences versus longer, you're going to increase your readership.
All right. Got some more questions, but let's get through these last few slides and then we'll address the questions.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
usually,
oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
one thing I didn't know if you wanted to address this,
Yeah.
Mike, but
Yeah, so polite mail, if you want to be able to see your reading e-score with the plugin, you can do a pre-flight test send to get it. But if you're using polite mail online, the browser-based version, you'll see this red arrow points to something that's toggle word count display. So if you click on that, it will bring this up for you. So just a little tip there that some people might not be aware of.
and Word also provides the Fleisch reading ease data as well. So if you
Right.
put your content into Word, you can get that. So this addresses that kind of cadence monthly question. So and again, it's kind of that the more often you send to from pattern, and then we actually broke this out, right? So we showed that chart before where once a month performed better than once a week, which performed better than once a day. But then we broke this out by, content length, right? So we wanted to say like, well, what's the difference for short, kind of medium and long messages? So we did a three even sized buckets to define what was short, what was medium, and what was long. And those just broke down to, 1.3, anything under 1.3 minutes was short, anything over 2.4 minutes was considered long. And then what you'll see is just in general, right? Your readership for long messages is just lower, and the more often you send them, kind of the lower that goes. But for short messages, it actually stays relatively consistent. And even when, even for high frequency, right? So even in that one per day, more than one per day, if those messages are short, they're performing just as well as once per month. So I think that's the key, um, is not necessarily how often you're sending, but how long that content is. And if you do have a lot of content, rather than saving it up for the whole month, you're better off feeding it out in shorter messages as soon as you have it ready, right? So by the end of the month, you put out the same amount of content, but you've put it out in a much easier to consume format just because it's shorter and people are much more accepting and will pay attention to and read shorter messages versus less frequent, longer ones.
All right. Let's get to a few questions. We only have a few minutes left. Um, Here's one. Any plans to add an AI feature that is trained on your benchmarking data as well as our own live data to help draft messages, make formatting, and send time recommendations, suggest A, B test, etc., to try to help improve our effectiveness? Or will you
And
could
yes, yep.
yeah,
Yeah, we
or
are actually working on that currently. So we have, some of our customers have, valid concerns about using public AI models. So we have licensed an AI model and are running it privately, and we're looking at doing just that. So having the tool be able to, like, hey, give me, convert this to a lower, reading E score, or, give me a suggestion for, how to increase my attention rate for we have that already for the subject line. We have an AI tool that will take your subject line and make suggestions based on both the benchmark data and your account data. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to incorporate these best practices and make recommendations, and then include your local data into that consideration. So it's in progress. Nothing in development ever goes as fast as I would like, but we're going to be putting pieces of it out. So we started with the subject line. We're doing the same thing for links. So we're looking at link text and link positioning, and we're going to have the AI help us make recommendations to you. for that, and then we'll move on to the text stuff and the timing stuff as well. So that's all in the works and be rolling out over time.
All right. Here's one for e-news content. Do you recommend just a few words with a hyperlink instead of text to keep it close to 250 words total? I think yes, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Yep, for sure. And then I want to circle back to newsletters. Our company has a lot of newsletters. They have a banner, an average amount of images, maybe 5 or 6, but they are generally bigger emails in length. Would it be a better option to send an email with the highlights, like 3 bullets, and a link to an online newsletter, like a SharePoint page, easy to look at and navigate?
Yeah. So again, depending on the total length of the newsletter, right? So if it's if it's under 500 words in total, particularly if it's closer to 250 words, you don't need to go to the effort to post it. You could just, have a nice formatted email with white space and a good subject line, and that should perform fine. But if, and you could certainly remove the banner. Often our suggestion is, get a from address that is the name of the newsletter, and then you can eliminate the banner because the banner is usually just the name of the newsletter. So you can do that to shorten it up. But if they are really long newsletters, then certainly doing the kind of the summary, and that's another case where an AI tool could help, right? You've got your long form email. I mean, certainly communicators can do this too, right? You can turn a one-page story into a couple of good sentences. Um, but that's a place where AI can be helpful. Um, but yeah, for anything really long, your better option is to post that long version on your intranet site and just do that short highlight section on the in the email. But just make sure you get enough. You get the key content that you want people in general to absorb from those stories right in the email, because again, your click rates at best are going to be that 10 to 12% range. So that's the percent of your audience that are actually going to get through to the fuller story. So you just want to make sure when you do those summaries, your any key content in that story that you want the majority of people to see, you want to get in those summary sentences.
All right. So we're at time. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been great. Really appreciate all the questions. As noted, we're going to be sending out a few different things, including this deck, the benchmark, the best practices, and this recording. So, and if you have other questions, you can certainly find us. I guess we could put our emails in the chat somewhere or something, but we'd love to hear more questions and provide answers to you. So thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye.